I've been employed for the last couple of years in the Dean of Students office here at Iowa State, and I see lots of familiar faces, so a lot of you already know this. But in my work as a programmer, my main area of concern has been programming for women or with women around women's concerns. I have done some graduate work in psychology and continue to pursue that as an interest of my own, even though I'm not have not completed a formal degree in that area. So, with that, I'll move into it. I chose the title, Psychology of Women Beyond the Stereotypes, to suggest two things. One is that I do think that many of the stereotypic traits that are attributed to women are exhibited by women. But I think that we're in the process of moving beyond those. Hi, I haven't seen you in a long time. Some of those traits, as you all know in terms of stereotype, are dependence, passivity, adaptability, intuitiveness, emotionality, nurturance, and concern with one's appearance. And I see these traits growing directly out of the other directedness of women's roles as wife and mother, in which women are groomed to fulfill. These qualities are good qualities, and I'm not attempting to say that women shouldn't have them, but I do think they need to be complemented by their counterparts of independence, assertiveness, the ability to reason logically, to take responsibility for oneself in the world. So I'm not going to go into how these traits are developed. I think a lot of writing has been devoted in the last couple of years to the process. How are women conditioned to be this way? Passive and intuitive and so forth. Wide variety: social learning theory, conditioning, self-fulfilling prophecy. You could go on and on, the kinds of theories that are brought to bear on why we as women act the way we do. I give very little credence to the anatomy as destiny type of explanations. I don't think we're just born that way. But I don't want to suggest that I think that there aren't important areas of biology or of anatomy that need to be looked at. Physiology, for instance, the relationship of hormones to emotions, this sort of thing. I do want to address myself to the process of change that I suggested that I think some women are in. I have both seen and participated in this process with other women as we attempt to move beyond those stereotypic traits. My observations are drawn from experiences and writings of predominantly white, middle-class, educated women, and many of them in their 20s and 30s. So I don't claim to be speaking for all women, and I don't claim that my theories apply to any beyond that group, because at this point that's where I'm coming from. You might ask, beyond the stereotype to what? I've suggested I think we're moving beyond that. Is there a new woman? Is there a new feminine image that we are trying to develop? More often I think I'm asked, why are women trying to become like men? My answer, first of all, is we don't want to become like men. And second, no, I don't think we are, that we do have a new image, if by that is meant a new mold that we're supposed to fit ourselves into. I don't think women's liberation is about smashing one box we've been put in order to build another box and then say you have to fit in that even if you've got to cut off an arm or a leg to do it. I do think we're about trying to be as fully human and as fully ourselves as it's within our power to do so. To be that self which one truly is, in Carl Rogers' term. It's very exciting to me, and I'm never sure for myself what's going to come up in this process of trying to, to be who I am, and I'm never sure what's going to come up in my friends, and it's just a very exciting process to see people struggle with getting rid of or trying to change behaviors that they don't like in themselves, and to come up with, something that feels more real to them, feels more like who they are. Okay, so my goal then, or our goal as women trying to change, is not really a place, but it's a process. And it's a process of self-definition, or what I call attaining inner freedom. How does one go about defining oneself? I think that is the essence of women's liberation, and I think we are in the process of learning what that means and learning what blocks there are to that process. In just trying to pull some sort of theory out of this whole thing, I've come up with several very rough stages, and people, I'm saying a first stage and a second stage, but I think people can start in different places and go different directions, and they overlap and everything else. This is part of the trouble with scientific language and my way of looking at things, that you have to label and separate and dichotomize that which really can't be separated. But at any rate, here's my attempt. The first stage I call from innocence to awareness. Paulo Freire, in The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, calls it naming one's oppression. Women's liberation has tended to call it consciousness raising. I think we're trying to discover how women are oppressed in our culture. And we often start with very obvious kinds of areas like discrimination and jobs and so forth. The objectification of women as sexual beings, things that are not very difficult to pick up if you start scratching around at all. This stage is usually characterized, I think, by an excitement and a rising of energy and lots of sort of aha experiences, as you all of a sudden, it feels like a scrim between you and life got lifted, and you start seeing, these things that have been there all along and you just never saw before. For instance, TV commercials, which you've heard or seen 1,000 times and never paid attention to, all of a sudden just sort of leap out at you, and you want to kind of smash the television set. My favorite unfavorite, or whatever you want to say, is the "Hun, bathroom bowl needs cleaning," which you probably heard lots of times, and maybe never analyzed what that's saying about, how that woman is regarded. And I remember the first time I noticed that, I just, as if he doesn't piss in it himself, what's his problem, And then, of course, she has to leap in there and say, oh, how awful, that she had let that get by her, that they had a dirty toilet. My experience, men never even notice the toilet's dirty, but everyone, everywhere you turn, these kinds of things start coming out at you. Jokes, magazine pictures, lots of stuff in the media, films. I know a good friend of mine, Rachel, who's here, is very interested in the theater, and at times she says, it has ruined some of the plays and things she's gone to sort of have this new consciousness, because you sit there just being so grated by all the, this put-downs of women that constantly come through. Or even if they aren't intended as put-downs, you can see what kind of a thing you're supposed to be if you're a woman. You are constantly supposed to be worried about how you look. Lots of stuff, directed at you to lose weight and to, get your hair, so forth. How to be a better mother, how to look good for your husband or for men in general, how to make your home a more comfortable place, and so on. Always directed at others. There's so little in our culture that's directed at women for themselves. Everything you're supposed to do and be conscious of is for other people. And I think in the sort of the end, what I call the moving from this stage to the next, there starts to be a gathering anger and frustration at all this. In the beginning, it's just sort of eye-opening, and you think, my gosh. Pretty soon it gets to be, damn it, And so the second stage is what I call doing something with this awareness. And I see sort of two main patterns. One is taken by the person who directs her anger and frustration outwards. She may join a women's rights organization, she may start filing suits, discrimination suits, or writing protest letters, or picketing a beauty contest, or working for abortion bill reform, repeal. She's likely to get in lots of heated discussions with people about women's movement and what it means to be a woman in our culture and so on. Many of the younger women reject the outer trappings of the feminine stereotype. I think it's their beginning of an attempt to define themselves, you know, ceasing to wear makeup, maybe wearing overalls or blue jeans a lot, maybe ceasing to shave under the arms and legs. You know, these kinds of things that you are, in our culture, supposed to do in order to be an attractive woman. And I really see that as someone saying, I'm okay the way I am, you know, I'm not going to, you know, put on stuff from the outside and be something I'm not, or take away something if it's hair, in order to be, you know, attractive to someone else. Older women or married women, I think, very often start resenting and then maybe move to negotiating on sharing the housework or the child care, whatever, if they haven't been doing that up to that point. The angry tirades and the movement itself is a rejection of the stereotype. Women are supposed to be the peacemakers in our culture, you know, keeping everything, the hostess, you know, keeping everything nice, you know, not creating havoc of all things. I think this is terribly upsetting to a lot of people, especially in the beginning when the women's movement started. I think many people simply don't know how to respond to angry women because, you know, many of them haven't seen it that much, and especially in public. I mean, you may have seen your mother angry or something like that, but, you know, not publicly angry women. And I think Elizabeth Janeway's book, Man's World, Woman's Place, is an excellent, excellent book to read if you haven't already read it. And she analyzes what happens to people when they start stepping out of what I'm calling a stereotype, and she calls a role. I think it's the same difference. But you make other people terribly uncomfortable, and they're going to do give you all kinds of negative feedback because they just assume that you either disappeared or, you know, got back into that mold so they could be comfortable again. And I think at this point, you know, a woman starts getting all sorts of flack. She may just be dismissed as a strident, unpleasant person, but she's more likely to be accused of being a lesbian or a castrating bitch, or maybe told that she's neurotic, or, you know, the negative feedback starts coming in. Aren't you proud of being a woman, you know? And so a woman who chooses this way of beginning her struggle, I think, gets a lot of flack, and that's a price that she pays for it, but she does find other women who are doing the same thing. She finds like-minded people, and I think that, you know, sort of obviously is an enormous help in standing up against negative feedback from other people. And she's likely to get some assurance that she's not neurotic, or that at least if she is, she's got lots of company. So I personally see this direction, a fairly healthy direction. I think if you got stuck there being perpetually angry, that it wouldn't be healthy. But I think the original angry response, I consider a healthy response. The other pattern, which I see a lot, and when I say healthy is meaning, you know, destructive to the person. Unhealthy would be destructive to the person. The other response was what I would call an unhealthy response in that regard, and that is the woman does not direct anger outwards, or maybe not even be aware of the fact that she's angry, which is very possible. And one of the things I certainly experienced for a long time, since part of the stereotype of being a woman is that you don't get angry. She can suffer a great deal of inner anguish. She's often isolated, many times a housewife, I think, who thinks that no one else is thinking or bothered by the same things that she's bothered by. She may very tentatively bring up something at a social gathering that bothers her. Maybe she lets out a little response to a joke and says she doesn't like it, you know, and then immediately she's asked, what are you, a women's libber, you know, one of those women's libber, and of course she immediately is going to retreat from that because after all, she doesn't want to be one of those. I mean, many women who intellectually would agree with a lot of what the women's movement is about, are scared to death of being labeled women's liber. I think, which partly is a tribute to the effectiveness of mass media. But if she continues to read and continues to be dissatisfied with things in her life that she's supposed to be getting fulfillment from but is not, and doesn't have any close friends who are experiencing the same sort of thing, I think what very often happens is she increasingly carries a load of guilt. What's wrong with me that I don't like, being a mother anymore, or, whatever it is, what's wrong with me? I'm a terribly selfish person. And I think some self-hate, which goes into being impotent. I think a person who experiences themselves as powerless, as having, no way of affecting their situation or affecting the world around them can turn it inwards in a self-hate, blaming kind of way, or can turn it outwards by, attacking the institutions. And the inward one, as I suggest, I think is a very self-destructive way to go with that. If they're stuck there, it may be because they don't know how or cannot bring themselves to seek out other women for help. God help them if they go to psychiatrists or psychologists for help, at least the majority of them, since most of those people are quite well educated into what women should be already, and they're very likely to get advice that if they just lose a little weight and try a new hairdo and redo the house, that they will, find that they really just weren't putting enough effort into fulfillment as a housewife, and that's all they have to do, and all this bad feeling will go away. Just an aside, some of you probably already know this, but there's a study that was done of the attitudes, I think it was of 75 psychiatrists and psychologists, both men and women, majority men, but there were some women, as to what they thought the traits of a mentally healthy person were. And that you had mentally healthy person, mentally healthy male, and mentally healthy female. And lo and behold, the mentally healthy male and the mentally healthy person match, and the mentally healthy female is another creature altogether who exhibits all these traits of dependence and emotionality and so forth that we talked about. It makes you really wonder, what kind of help you're going to get if you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. The third stage, and again, as I'm saying, these all, intermingle and everything, is what I call discovering the internal oppressor. I think up to this point, if you've gotten angry enough to direct your hate or your anger outwards, you have been very likely to be blaming men or institutions, for where you are. And I think a certain amount of that's true, and I think a certain amount of the action that comes out of that is very valid, and particularly the social action kinds of behavior. I don't think it's very much help to attaining mental health or feeling good about yourself or whatever. I don't think, because if you blame everybody else for the way things are, in a sense you're still giving them all the power. They still have all the control if they're the ones who are calling the shots and you're reacting to it. And so you're still in a place of impotency. I don't think that feels good. So I see this third stage as a very, very important one, and that's discovering how we as women contribute to our own oppression. How we as women, as a group, contribute, and how I as an individual contribute to my own bad feelings about myself. I think, in my experience so far, the RAP group has been the primary vehicle through which a person does this. It may be just a couple of friends getting together, but in this process, you get together, or we get together as women with other women, and we simply talk about where we are, how we're feeling about where we are, and so on. And I think in the beginning, there is this reassurance. You find out, 8 out of 10 people in their marriages have, almost identical problems, and so you realize that there's something there that goes beyond just the individual personalities. As I say, you get this assurance that you aren't really weird. There are other people who think the same way and so on. But I think if it only stays at that level, if you simply, continue to talk with your friends or talk in your rap group about, your situation, it can turn into maybe more of a complaining session, than a helpful one. But what's been really exciting to me is to see women I know and for myself to see how I contribute to those situations, because then I can move to try to get handles on those behaviors and change myself. And if I change myself, you can better believe the people around me, and my husband in particular, is going to have to change. Either he's going to have to change and reject me, and that'll certainly be a change, or he'll have to change in some kind of productive way, and then we'll be in a better place, hopefully. So it seems to me what we try to do in the rap groups is, if we get to this stage, is get a hold of what am I doing to contribute to this? How deep does it go in me? What price am I paying for it? What can I do once I've identified that, what's in me? What can I do about it? How can I get some handles on it? What are some options for me to, some different kinds of behavior that I can exhibit instead of being stuck in this pattern? I'll just take one example of this to try and make it more clear. And that is what I would call taking oneself seriously in the area of work. Many of the women in my age group, I'm 30, and a number of women somewhere between 25 and 30, who are college educated and had perhaps had some work experience, and then maybe are out, or maybe they're still in it, or whatever. But they know themselves to be educated. They know themselves to have some interests and skills, but it's sort of like have never quite taken that seriously enough to really say, what do I want to do with this? What career do I want to pursue? Or if I don't want to pursue a career, what kind of work? What is my contribution to the larger culture? This sort of thing. I think women do take themselves terribly seriously in their relationships. In fact, too seriously, in my opinion. If your relationship to your husband and your children is your whole life, of course you're going to take it seriously, and you're going to, you're just going to think about all the ramifications of anything that you do with this person, or anything he does or your children do, and in my mind, that is too much of a load to put on a relationship. It's like you're trying to get your life satisfaction out of a relationship, and I think human beings need other kinds of activities and so forth to get their satisfaction from. So, say I identify the fact that I have not really taken myself seriously in regards to work of some kind. Okay, what might be a block for me to keep me from doing anything about that, even once I discover that I haven't taken myself seriously? I think I've already kind of suggested the importance of relationships, I think, is the major block for most women. The fear of being selfish if they put their own needs first, the fear of losing the relationship with their husband, the fear of damaging their children if they, go out and try to work or meet their own needs. And I think these are all very real blocks to keep a woman from deciding, I'm going to put me first for a change. And what price am I going to have to pay if I decide to do that? Put myself first. I think there's a number of prices. So one of the women in our rap group went through fairly recently was putting herself back into the work world after being out several years and having to go through interviews and so on, feeling very, very shaky and having very little self-confidence. And we role-played in our group, and had her go through it 2 or 3 times and help her get where she put herself forward, and I've got this to offer and so on, instead of, coming into the interview and, please, mister, I'd like a job, kind of an attitude. I got ahead of myself there. That's how you deal with it, but at any rate. A price would be that kind of insecurity and turmoil about, putting yourself in a situation you haven't been in for a while. Another price would be guilt. I've already mentioned feeling guilty of taking away from your husband or your children if you do that. Another is the turmoil that you're going to bring into the lives of other people around you when you decide to change. As I say, because I certainly don't think one person in a family can change without bringing changes on to the other people, whether they like it or not. And you have to take responsibility for that. Yes, I am going to change. Yes, you are going to have to pick up your own socks now. Yes, you are going to have to get dinner sometimes. You know, whatever it is. And the final risk, of course, is perhaps losing your relationship. If your husband is very locked into having a supportive wife at home who does all the things that she's been doing and he expected her to do, and now she says, I'm not going to do it anymore, he very well may say, you know, you're not the person I married. And he's right. At least you're trying not to be. So I think there are a lot of prices for changing, and I wouldn't kid anybody about it. I don't kid anybody about it if I'm, you know, talking about even about changing behavior as an option for another woman. The last thing, then, after identifying the blocks and identifying the prices you're going to have to pay if you change your behavior, is, then, of course, going about changing the behavior. And I think we definitely need a lot of help with this area. And one of the things that excites me very much is something that's going around now called assertiveness training, which is simply, you know, getting practice in putting yourself forward, being direct about what it is that you want, being direct about how you feel about what it is, and then you know, dealing with the situation as it arises. I think this process of taking oneself seriously and of recognizing one's own needs as legitimate, of not feeling guilty when one asserts himself, herself, is long and difficult, but I see movement with people, and I think it's very exciting. I feel like I'm seeing living proof that B.F. Skinner is wrong. You know, people do have the freedom of choice, and they can move to change themselves and not just be, you know, the result of forces too big or somebody else dangling out the carrot and the stick or whatever it is. In a day when people often see themselves, I think, as impotent, as unable to affect the larger society, it's very exciting to me to live and work with women who are proving that they can do something, and there's just a tremendous vitality and energy and so forth that's released as this happens. It's extremely rewarding, and it's very exciting to have other women be such beautiful people. I think that's what I want to say. The end. I'd welcome comments or questions or whatever. No reactions? Yeah.
How does the women's movement relate to the other power struggles in the society? Power such as the Black Power movement or the Gay Power movement? Like you said, looking to set up a power structure.
Am I?
Is the movement that you're involved in?
Well, I think the movement has different organizations with different goals. I think some of the organizations like National Organization for Women and WHEEL and so on are very definitely saying, you know, we want a piece of the pie and we want it, you know, on the same terms that everybody else is getting it. And I think that's fine, you know, that they're doing that. I also hear them saying, a lot of them, like Wilma Scott Heide, who's president of the National Organization of Women, who's here, that she has lots of ideas about how she'd like those structures and that power to change. You know, whether women who have those kinds of ideas can bring that off is obviously open. Yeah.
I'd like to come back to that question, and it seems to me that the sequence of stages you have mentioned could be seen or identified in any kind of liberation movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have addressed that question previously in things you read. which way did it go? Did you identify it in other places and apply it to the psychology of liberation processes in women, or would you say that you discovered it in women's lib?
For me personally, I discovered it first and then read some things afterwards, like the Pedagogy of the Oppressed I just read several weeks ago, and it was really exciting for me to see him putting out in, the Brazilian peasant, the very same thing that I felt like I've seen happen in Ames, Iowa.
In what way are there any crucial differences between different liberation movements, as opposed to women's liberation in that sequence of stages?
Yeah. Oh heavens, I don't know. I haven't made a study of all the movements, and so I don't know. I suppose the major crucial difference is the fact that, of women living with men, is, say, quite a bit different. I mean, in that kind of a relationship is much different, say, than the way most blacks live with most whites.
Probably closer to the personal family.
I think, personally, I think that makes it more difficult in one sense, because you can see the direct impact of what you're doing on people that you love and care for if you start, changing yourself. It's easier, I think, to fight somebody that you can call a pig or something, who's impersonal and out there away someplace. Yeah.
Seems to me like the whole thing is getting away from the stereotypes that aren't functional anymore. And it's getting away from the stereotypes of women, the stereotypes of men, the stereotype of psychiatrists or psychologists that, I think you mentioned. And the idea is that, people aren't black and white, but they're gray. The whole idea that women aren't just one set of traits and men are another set, but that it's all this in between. Combination of all that.
I think the process started off, at least for me, and a number of women I know, in terms of our own psychology, of saying these things are not good for me as a person. This stereotype of woman is damaging me if I try to fit myself to it. I think it didn't take us very long to see that the reciprocal, or that's also true for men, and that the kinds of behavior that are demanded of men, I think, make them much less than full human beings, just as much as ours. But that's their problem, in a sense. Yeah.
It seems that, I guess I would quarrel with you saying that you have to pay a price for, and the kind of extreme example is, kind of giving up a relationship. It seems that, to me, in the process of defining yourself, you're not giving up something. I think it's just a question of semantics, but I wouldn't, if in fact, what happens as a result of a woman defining herself is that she's unable to stay in a particular relationship or a particular job or whatever, it just seems kind of backwards to define that as paying a price.
I don't understand. I mean, it seems to me like you're losing something, right? You're giving up something. You may be gaining something else. I'm saying you're obviously moving towards something different.
It seems to me a contradiction with women defining themselves, because all of those prices, all of those things you give up have been defined by men.
Oh no, you've been defining them too, right along with them. You've been defining that relationship to your husband or whatever.
I think women have been accepting rather than defining. I don't think women don't have any power to define it. You kind of fall in
Okay.
the definition.
Right.
You didn't create yourself.
Right. But whether or no, I guess, this is my philosophy of life, is that everything a human being does has both a price and a payoff. You get benefits from things you do, and you also, lose something by things you do, even if it's just operating in a different kind of a way.
Right. I would just put a lot of emphasis on the positive. That part of that redefining is also redefining what in fact the price you pay is, or what also defining what you gain yourself, rather than having somebody else say, well, you're all right now, but knowing it yourself.
Right. And you very well may decide, for instance, if changing a relationship means I lose a I mean, changing means I lose my relationship. I may decide that relationship is worth losing, you know.
Yeah, I
But
think,
I'm just saying that I think there's pain involved,
sure.
you know.
I think
That's basically what I'm trying to
I
say.
think one of the real payoffs of the women's movement is women having relationships with other women that are not part of our youth.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I didn't address myself very much. I think you're right to what some of the payoffs are. Partly because I think that they are different for different people, and partly because I still see a lot of us in the process of finding out what those payoffs are. You know, we're hoping those payoffs are there. You know, we're assuming that they are, but um, you know, like one of the payoffs that I think maybe was just implicit in what I said is maybe the point that you're dwelling on, and that is, to me, how good it feels to define yourself, to feel yourself as having potency and some control and some power, and not to feel manipulated or pushed around or whatever. I obviously value that quite highly. Yeah.
Given individuals what they are, you probably can't answer this question, but I was wondering if you've observed any kinds of definable points of no return, either in terms of age or circumstances, where the breaking of the stereotype, if it's not done then, it probably will not be. Given, let's say, Ames, Iowa, 1970.
Mm-hmm. No?
Is there some...
Haven't seen any age limits yet. Yeah, it was really exciting to me this quarter in our seminar 73 on the changing roles of women. We had 4 or 5 women from the community, and Eleanor was one of them, to come and contribute, and I hope get excited about some of the things too. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to speak, but I've just been amused by the whole woman's role and sympathetic. I just never was not liberated, never.
And so you're amused by what?
Amused, I say, amused.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's an individual. I realize that, biologically women have children and this sort of thing. By the way, I have 5 children also. I always did everything I liked to do, raise a bunch of good kids, and, well, I just, I didn't want to be the executive of a corporation, but if I had it, I would have.
Yeah. I think there are, well, I'll just say how that affects me, because it reminds me of something I might have said a couple of years ago, which is that I think I was very lucky in the way I was brought up and so on, that I was freer than some women are at the beginning from some of these things. And I think what a lot of women in the past have done, who have been like that, is to feel themselves to be very different and possibly superior, and have kind of the pull yourself up by your bootstraps philosophy, that like for me, my assumption was, if I can do it, anybody can, kind of a thing. And it doesn't usually, I still meet women who say that, who don't have any sympathy for the movement, because they feel themselves as individuals to have been able to break out, and they don't understand what all the fuss is about. And I personally, changed on that when I came in contact with other women who were really struggling, with this whole thing, and found out really how my own individual background, particularly my relationship to my father and so forth and so on, these things had really made a great difference in my life that many other people didn't have.
I don't think you feel superior, but you're just a little amazed. I was, as I was understanding. You just don't know why they feel oppressed. Really.
Mm-hmm.
You can understand that, that they're not getting a break in the economy, this sort of thing.
Yeah. But you're saying you don't understand kind of what holds people there.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's some of the things I tried to suggest, in the way I think people stay there, like the internalized guilt and fear and so forth would.
You do have to be strong, because you are different to do that.
That's right.
If you don't like to talk about diapers and cookies and
I have my personal opinions about that too. I think it may get terribly boring. Thanks. Yeah.
That's, you know, having been one of those people who thought I was totally liberated, and having, you know, I mean, really having thought, well, particularly at the beginning of the movement, well, this is an indulgence of white middle class women, and what relationship does it have to me? I'm doing everything I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that really hit home and really made me realize was that I had no relationship with women. Men were always more interesting, they were always doing more interesting things, and the thing that really, you know, kind of just paralyzed me for a long time was realizing that I have any relationships with women.
Mm-hmm.
I have some wonderful friends, always have, from all walks of life. But I admit, when I happen to be in some situation, for instance, in the social categories of your husband's work, and you're with other kinds of women. And I guess I'm all for the movement, but it is hard for me to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Why they
Yeah, I don't think you're alone there at all. I mean, I think, you know, in fact, one of my best friends I was talking to last night, or 2 nights ago, I haven't seen her for about 4 years. We spent most of the evening talking about this because she was saying the same thing, you know. I don't understand why, you know, other women can't do this, that, and the other. It seems to me you just do what you have to do. And that's because she has a very good self-concept, which is necessary. Lots of women don't.
I think you can have a feeling of having been a liberated person over the years and really be more or less liberated. And I say more or less because you have a culture going against you and you realize it or not. And as you become more aware of what the struggle is and all the symbols and all the nooks and crannies and changes, you view, say, take an old movie, or even the ancient fairy tales, and you realize that we have been culturized from the time we were able to sit still and listen to a story that our mothers read about the king who, if the son-in-law would do certain feats, would be given the hand of his daughter in marriage, or half the king and half the kingdom thrown in. And I thought, now who the hell is the king to give his daughter away? Who's doing the sleeping with? He? No, his daughter. And I saw this whole cultural pattern through different eyes, and I realized I'm not as liberated as I thought I was, because I've got this box that's surrounding me. Whether I like it or not, whether I feel boxed in or not, I'm boxed in. Right along with my sisters. Because the culture pattern says I am.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize that if you're living in your own little world, and you don't come into contact, you don't have to fight it, you are made less aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do try to fight it in some way, then it hits you right from the eyes. And you find out that it is there. And we need each other. How about our culture that we exploit men, women?
Pardon me?
How about this, I can't remember the name of the gal who wrote this book, I think it's a little far out, but women, because of the situation they're placed in, exploit men, and I see more of this. Really. They're too lazy to get out their cans and do something, you know, and so their husband does all the work and does all the worry and all the hard hats and dies, and they're left with the stocks and bonds, or else they go out to work. I mean, I think both sides are exploited, and when everybody becomes human beings, and we're all going to be free, hallelujah.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't deny that. I think women get some benefits from things the way they are. You know, I wouldn't try to deny that at all. I also, I was thinking about this earlier, you know, that I've heard men complain about feeling manipulated or being manipulated by women. And in whatever way, you know, sometimes just a personal manipulation, or sometimes more like the crass example of getting a mink coat by, you know, such and such, whatever. And I kind of have two reactions. One is I think of a typical pattern of people who don't have very much real power is to try to get power indirectly. You know, if you can't get something that you want by being direct about it, and women aren't supposed to be assertive and direct and forward and so on, then you know, you go around the bush, which is another way of trying to manipulate somebody else to get what you want. And I don't, you know, condone that, but on the other hand, I think it's smart. I mean, you know, it's a way of getting something that you want, and if the man's taken in by it, it's his problem. He is. I mean, I don't hear that many men feeling all that exploited, or, you know, talking about it. Now, maybe they do,
Raised by mothers.
you know.
Remember that.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. By the mothers,
Right.
by themselves, mostly, usually.
You know, I was talking with two men, both well educated, both who teach here in ISU, and I mentioned to them that I thought that until men are liberated, also women will not be liberated in the sense of being human beings along with other human beings, which goes for all monogamy. And they were absolutely amazed to think that I would think they weren't liberated.
Right.
And they couldn't quite see themselves as not being fully liberated, white,
Already,
male,
right.
etc.
That's part of what I mean, is that I find very few men who have a sense of being oppressed, you know. And the ones who do define it usually in terms of their job. They feel oppressed by the rat race, you know, kind of thing. But I think their oppression is much, much larger than that. And I think one of the greatest parts of it most men don't recognize yet, which is how out of touch with their own emotions and feelings they are. And how little, what little ability they have to be intuitive and nurturant towards other people. And I don't think most men view that as a loss to themselves at this point. Some are beginning to, and I think that's really exciting. Was there something waving over there? Annie, when'd you get in town? Sneaked in?
How far along do you think women's liberation movement can get until you, this guy Keller, simply gets rid of this daily exposure on TV, stereotype? I was wondering how many suits are being filed against advertising agencies. I don't know.
No.
Actually, one, Eastern Airlines, and NOW filed it. They lost. And it seems to me it's almost a hopeless battle until that daily, hourly exposure to the stereotype on TV. And what's your feeling about that? There should be some militant action against TV advertising.
I think there has been some. I think the one I mentioned, in fact, there was one like that, the bathroom bowl one. Oh no, it was the one about my wife, I think I'll keep her. Remember that one? You know, there was a reaction that got changed. I never watched television, so I'm really out of my territory, you know, here. I think there have been a few suits. I don't know enough about it to know. And I think what's true for me is true for most of the, like I say, white, middle class, educated women that I'm with, and that is we don't watch that much television, so that hasn't been that big of a concern to us yet. But I really agree that some change is going to have to take place there. I think they will. I mean, you're seeing a few little things happen, like with the Northwestern Bell, you know, in their advertising, having the woman up on the pole, you know, that picture is coming out more often and this sort of thing. I think it's interesting when you look historically at what happened during World War II in the media. You know, when it was decided that women really needed to be in the factories and helping the country in its hour of need, you had all kinds of pictures and stories of Rosie the Riveter and, you know, all these kinds of things. I mean, women in a whole range of capacities and working in the aircraft factories and all this kind of thing. And there was about a year and a half in there when there was a lot of that in the media. So I have a feeling it could change really quickly if there was a need. Yeah.
Part of the problem, of course, here is the FCC, which is all male, or just about all male. And they have no intention of really changing that very much. Nicholas Johnson's just about alone on the FCC. He's going on. He's going on. And Nixon will replace him. He's not going to replace him with Nicholas Johnson, that's for sure. So, although now can institute some suits, which are of course very expensive and very time-consuming, the basic quality of television advertising isn't going to change for a long time now. And since kids are watching more TV than ever, I guess, they're growing up with the same stuff. There's no law that can prevent Pepsi-Cola from having somebody ram a Pepsi-Cola bottle down a woman's throat and have that person be a man who's doing it. All the implications are like that, the bathing suit for the same and the sea going with it. So that's not what I'm very pessimistic about much change, except the kind of tokenism that you mentioned with the woman on the pole stuff, or Con Edison showing a woman in a ditch digging. Occasionally we will see that, but also all the billboard advertising is still the same.
Yeah.
And, on and on.
That's one of the things that, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just have to say, don't you think that the kids are developing such a cynicism towards advertising that they just simply don't believe it?
They go buy the stuff. They go buy everything. You name it, they buy it. It's advertised. Everything from soft drinks. In fact, the sexier the stuff is, the more sexier implications it has, the more push down not just women, but men too, that they buy that more than anything. It's very attractive. It's very exciting. Yeah. Smoking's going out.
I was saying, that's probably going to take one of the, the thing about studying history, I think at times it's very discouraging to see, like say in the feminist movement, the 1800s, all the human effort, consciously made to change certain things, and then, the war comes along and changes all of it, or say the birth control pill, or just a technological change or something like that at times that can bring about a change so quickly that people have been struggling along for 100 years trying to change, but that's only part of the story, I don't know. What flashed in my head was it probably would take something like that for the media. I can't, that whole thing seems so enormous, I can't imagine, a few action groups directed at the media is really going to do that much. Which wouldn't say, I wouldn't discourage anybody from tackling that if that's their bag.
The stereotypes in the media are the same stereotypes that are there in the fairy tales. I mean, it's not, we're just exposed a lot to them, every 15 minutes on television. They're the same stereotypes that we live with in textbooks.
Yeah, I see a lot more action happening there that seems to be more within the range of doing something about, parents having, looking at the books that their kids are getting and having some say about it. Thank you.